Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining today's campus conversation, Witnessing Gender-Expansive Experiences and Practices Within the Arts, facilitated by none other than Juniper Meadowlark Moneypenny. My name is Melissa Mayard, and I use she, her pronouns, and I have the pleasure of serving as the Associate Director for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion here at the Office of University Life. With me here today is my colleague, Gabby Dominguez. Gabby, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Melissa, and thank you, Juniper, for leading this discussion. My name is Gabby Dominguez, pronouns she, hers, and I'm the program coordinator for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion initiatives here at the Office of University Life. I'm sorry for the background noise. I'm trying to enjoy some sunshine out here in California. But again, thanks so much for joining us this evening.
Awesome. Thank you, Gabby. So this event is part of the Office of University Life's Task Force on Inclusion and Belonging at Columbia that's about making friends and building community through real life conversations. Before I turn it over to our amazing facilitator, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items. First, this program will be recorded and shared via University Life's YouTube channel. If you have any questions about this recording, please contact our office. Also, please make sure to remain muted unless you are talking and may be called on by the facilitator. If possible, please turn on your videos for the event. I know we're a small but mighty group, but the great thing about this is that we are having an intimate conversation, getting to know each other a little bit more, and with an obvious interest in the arts. And Juniper's just done a really great job of putting this together. So the best way to enjoy this event is to be a part of it. So this conversation will take about 60 minutes, and Juniper will be guiding your participation through a series of activities. As we get started, please think about this question throughout. I feel blank about having this conversation because blank. Take it away, Juniper.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. I just want to give a quick nod to the music you heard when you're joining the conversation. That is Liz Ryerson, and it's a computer music composition for an indie video game called Dysphoria. So I wanted to acknowledge that work of art, and thanks for being here. My name is Juniper. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm studying pre-med in the School of General Studies. I'm zooming in from my hospital that I work at in the Bronx, and I've prepared some kind of arts experience for us to look at, and then I want us to go around and introduce ourselves. So you could just say your name, your pronouns if you're comfortable, and where you're zooming from, and how you feel about today's conversation. And I can start just by saying that I feel fluttery about having this convo because I'm so excited to share some art that makes me feel things. I'm looking at everyone in a gallery view. Does anyone want to unmute, or should I call on people?
I can go. My name is Tinas Venter. I use he, him pronouns. Currently, I am, despite my background, actually in New York, but missing home in the Bay. I am excited about this conversation, just to about the community building aspect, and also just to learn about what other people think about this topic.
Next on my screen, I see Kale.
Hi, yeah, my name is Kale. I use he, him pronouns. I'm zooming in from Richmond, Virginia, although I've been in New York for the past few years, and I'm excited about this conversation. I just joined GS, or got accepted to GS, and we'll be starting in the fall. And so this is my first student life kind of talk, so I'm very excited.
Next, thank you. Next, I see David.
Hi, yes, I'm David. Pronouns he, him, his. I am actually also part of University Life. I am fairly new to the Columbia campus and Columbia community, and I am also excited to be here and to learn. I don't think this is a conversation that I've really heard much about, and so for me, it very much is a learning opportunity, and something to hear other people's opinions and hear what different perspectives than my own.
Awesome. And then lastly, I see Minook.
Hi, my name is Minuk and I'm he, his, him, his, and I am going to general studies, group general studies, starting this fall, new transfer student. And I am zooming from New York. And I'm excited to learn what kind of issues or things. I was just curious what kind of things will be talked and wanted to learn on opportunity. Yeah.
Karma, thanks for joining us. We're just going around now. If you want to turn your camera on, would you feel comfortable introducing yourself with your pronouns and the school you're a part of, Columbia, and maybe how you feel about this conversation today?
Yeah, sure. My name is Carmen. Pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm the Associate Dean for Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Community Engagement at the School of Social Work. And I was intrigued by just the title of the event because last year we held an event on gender affirming praxis, particularly within clinical work and access to healthcare. And so it was interesting to see something similar with respect to connections to the arts. So just hear more to listen and learn.
Awesome, thank you for joining us. So thanks for sharing your info. I'm very excited to have you here. And as we're having this conversation, we want to agree to some community guidelines and some expectations for how we're receiving and giving information today. So I'm going to read these out loud, and I believe they'll also be pasted in the chat box. And I will just begin with treating each other with respect. And it's pretty self-explanatory that we want to be engaging with each other respectfully. I encourage us all to use I statements, so focusing on your experiences and your reactions. If we could all keep an open mind while others are sharing and kind of receive with a spirit of curiosity, I think that would be most helpful. I'm going to encourage everyone to listen to each other, not to interrupt. And a really important guiding rule can be taking space and making space. I've also heard it described as step up and step back. So we want to share our voice, but make sure that everyone also has that same space and opportunity. So I hope that we'll be able to experiment with new ideas and kind of challenge our assumptions about this topic in whatever ways that we can. And then one last reminder is to take care of yourselves. I think the arts are such an evocative site for us to explore some of these ideas, but as such, sometimes, if you find yourself getting activated or feeling like you need to go get a glass of water, turn your camera off, I empower you. I hope you feel empowered to do so as you need. So if everyone could just nod your head, give me a thumbs up that we might agree to these. Okay, I see everyone in agreement. Thanks for being willing to agree. And if you would like to add anything else, you can always unmute yourself and share anything you'd like to toss on that list. Okay, and welcome caller who's called in. I can't see your name, but we're happy to have you here. Since you're from a phone, I don't know if you can unmute yourself. I don't know if you have that option, but feel free to introduce yourself if you can. Okay. So before we dive into the main conversation, just sort of as an icebreaker and to get comfortable, we're just going to apply these guidelines to a small activity that connects to exploring identity, basically sharing our names and the story of our names. And I think that as it relates to gender, personal identity, history, it's a great one for our conversation today. So Gabby is going to paste into the chat, I believe, some guidelines, but if we could go around and maybe illuminate or inform the names that we've already shared in our introductions, but just maybe the meaning of your name as you have learned it, the significance of your name, what it shares like or what it feels like to have your name. And maybe your name reflects something about your identities, such as your race or ethnicity, your socioeconomic class, religion, your gender. And maybe we've encountered assumptions about our names. And is there anyone that is jumping to start or wants to begin? I think typically if we were in a larger group, we'd do this in pairs. But as we're a small group, Gabby and I talked about doing it all together. Oh, I see Kale's raising his hand. Thank you.
So I wasn't sure if we should, raise first or just unmute. So.
Oh yeah, that's great.
I think this is a really interesting question. My name was originally supposed to be Kalen, C-A-L-E-N, until a few weeks before my birth, and my parents were looking through like liner notes of Velvet Underground album and saw John Kale and thought that sounded better. Interesting things it has or that have revealed themselves to me through my name over time is that it's sort of genderless and doesn't really exist anywhere else in the world. And so it has been interesting to see whether it's based on a paper I've written or an email I've sent, based on the tone, what people perceive me as, especially before the inclusion of pronouns in email signatures. And racially, it's been really interesting because when people see my first name next to my last name, they forget all the rules of English and make it Calais or Cali or whatever, which is funny. If you replace the first letter with B or D or any other letter, you would know how to say it, Dale, Bale. But when you see it next to that Latin last name, people get creative.
Oh my gosh, thanks for sharing that.
Thank you for the question.
Yeah. Anyone else raised hands? Okay, in the wake of Kale's very generous sharing, I raised my hand and I'll go. I chose my own name, like many people who are, oh, wow. I don't know if y'all also have your phones going off. There we go. Sorry, I apologize for that. Like many people who have chosen their own names, I get a lot of reaction to mainly like beautifully. I feel most people are like stunned by my name and remark on it. But my name came from like my own kind of interpersonal reflection journey. But I think this is interesting because my name that I was given by my family, starting at 5, I started pronouncing it in a completely different way and just like never liked it. And then just as I got deeper into my life, realized like I can change more than just the pronunciation. Like I can toss the whole dang thing out. And that I think was pretty like liberating to realize.
I could
Do you
share
have
mine, Juniper. I wish I had a really nice story of like my name is like a really significant meaning. I looked it up because I knew we were gonna do this exercise. And my full name is Gabriela, which means God is my strength. But my parents did not get it from the Bible. They got it from a telenovela, which kind of speaks on my Mexican American identity. If you don't know what telenovelas are, they're Mexican soap operas, and they're very dramatic, but they really like that name because the woman was a feminist, a strong individual, and they wanted me to take on that personality. And yeah, I really like it. I go for Gabby for short, but definitely full Gabriela very close to my heart.
Thanks for sharing that. Anyone else? Next brave person? David.
Yeah, I guess I just wanted to follow up because I also have a Mexican American background, and with my name in English, typically it'll be David Beltran or Beltran or some variation of that. But I guess the actual pronunciation is David Beltran, which a lot of people usually don't get on the first try. But As far as like the meaning of my name, I don't think there's any, at least I don't know like the historical significance of it. It's been passed down in my family. So I'm actually a junior. My father and grandfather also were David. And so it's kind of been passed down for a few generations. But it is a very common name. And I've met people really from around the world with either the same name or kind of variations of David or David, which is very interesting. I've met Davide from Italy and then another David from Colombia with a similar spelling, but not the exact same. Yeah, so that's the story of my name.
I love how it ties into like those family histories. Thank you. I saw Tynus, did you raise your hand?
Yes. So I'm originally from South Africa, and naming traditions there are strong. And so the firstborn gets named after the father's father. And so my name is Tynus, after my grandfather. The history, the more commonly, some people might know Martinez. That is the Spanish derivative from the Roman name, and the Dutch derivative stuck with Martinez for a while and then eventually dropped Mar and kept on going with Tynus. So that's, yeah, kind of the history of my name.
Thanks so much. Do we have any other name sharers? Oh, 2 participants raised hand. Let's see. Anna?
I think Karma was first.
Oh, sorry. I can't see.
No worries. I love doing this exercise, by the way. So my name is Carmen Arisha Lowe, and my mother is Scottish. I'm originally from Jamaica, and my mother is Scottish Indian, East Indian, and my dad is African American. And it was very big in the civil rights movement here in the United States, and very much a Pan-Africanist. And I have 2 older brothers and the baby of the family. So my brothers got African names, Kwame Nairi and Timamu Ahmed. And when my mom was pregnant with me, my Indian grandmother was like, I know it's going to be a girl, and you must give her an Indian name. And sort of my dad and mom, it was originally going to be Krishna, and then my dad was like, no, if that's really going to fit. And so then they decided on Carmen. And Carmen Arisha means destined to show light to the world. So
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that. Let's see. Who has not shared? I think Manuk and Anna have not.
I can go next. My name is Anna, and I'm from Germany, and it means grace of God. And I think my parents chose it because it's so universal, and it really helped me because I traveled a lot and everyone knows how to pronounce or how to say Anna or Anna. Yeah, that's the story of my name.
I'll go next. My name is Korean name, and my grandfather gave it to me. And Korean name usually have meaning for each syllable. My case, Min and Uk has meaning. Min means people and Uk means light. So my grandfather wanted me to be some people's light, like hope. I'm not sure how it's going, but yeah, that's the meaning.
I love that. What a metaphor for how we want to be in the world too. I love that. Let's see. Is there anyone who?
Sure, I'll go, Juniper.
Thanks, Melissa.
No problem. And I'm primarily remaining muted and off camera because I really want to provide the space for you all to be able to engage, but I will give the story of my name. It's interesting, you know, Carmen mentioned siblings. My siblings have the most unique names and I don't, which is like, I think middle child syndrome there. You know, I am a middle child, so I'm just like, oh, makes sense. Thanks, Mom and Dad. But apparently Melissa was a name, not my original name, actually. So the name that they gave the nurse, she misspelled it and like assumed it to be Melissa, but it was supposed to be Melissa, like with a Z. And the nurse just kind of made it Melissa, and they were like fine with it, I guess. And so my name just became Melissa. No middle name. I don't have a middle name, which again, my siblings do. So once again, speaking to the middle child experience, but I've learned to love my name. Melissa, I think is used to be fairly common. I don't know that it's as common anymore. So I think of it as a very sort of like 90s name for a lot of 80s and 90s babies. So yeah, so I'm Melissa Mayard, and I think I've become proud. Although I did find out that my nickname is Missy, technically, but I didn't find that out until late adulthood, and by then it was too late. So I tried to get my friends to call me that, but it just didn't catch on as much as I wanted to. So if you want to call me Missy, feel free to. But yeah, thanks all.
Great, thank you. So just to reflect on that experience, what was it like to receive people's names and their stories, or what was it like to share? I know it feels, for me, it felt personal, and I always feel like a little bit shy. Oh, David, what would you like to share?
I always find it really interesting to hear people's kind of stories and background. Personally, I have a background in journalism, so although I'm not doing that, I'm still always very curious to hear about people's stories. And being that I have a fairly common name, I always love hearing about other people who have maybe backstories to their names, or other interesting things that we may have in common. I also don't have a middle name, which is my brother does. So I think hearing stories to learn, and then also hearing things that we may have in common, is always something that I very much enjoy.
What was that like? Okay. Let's see. Yeah, I feel like sharing your name's really personal, and we may not give the space for people to share all that background info, or that the stories informing our names. So it kind of helps us understand each other. And again, we're practicing those guidelines, practicing respect. And I think now we can move into our conversation about gender expansive practices in the arts, and just kind of seeing works that I'm going to share today in the whole context of queer art and culture across modalities. So while we're looking at the artists, I actually would like you to think about these in your mind. I think Gabby was going to put them in the chat, but we're going to ask ourselves how history and activism and identity are inhabited by queer cultural producers, and recreating opportunities to engage with these works and interpret them. In what ways can queer visual culture and artistic practice offer more inclusive and diverse ways of living? What do these artists or these works teach us in navigating, inhabiting our own spaces and environments differently? I would love to hear from you too, about your own encounters with art and artwork, maybe your own making practices, and your own kind of connections between how you see gender in the arts. I've made a Google Doc with some people and works and orgs that I kind of curated, but it'll be collaborative. So if you have the link, you can add to it. And I'd love to go back, maybe in like a couple of weeks time, and see what we've collaboratively pulled. So I can't, we have such a time limited, experience here, and I didn't want to have it be too didactic, but I am going to share my screen with a PDF that just has some images. So can we all see that? Okay, I'm looking at the gallery. Yes, people are nodding. Thank you. So I put maybe more artists than we can go over. So bear with me here, but this first artist, I think it's interesting that we talk about names. There's a really great interview with Sonali Muholi where they say, they introduce themselves, give their name, and say, like, I was not given this name, like I had to earn and build this. And I think that that connection really is a good segue into our conversation. So Moholy has, kind of sees themselves as a visual activist and an art activist, and most recently has been documenting kind of this lived history of queer South Africans. And, there are different bodies of work within their practice, but a big part, I think, of their practice is this documentation, this idea of increasing visibility and creating a record of people's lives. And they're so artful, the compositions and the staging of them. There's obviously like a high degree of craft to them. But I think that their work is in really amazing conversation with Claude Cahoon. This next slide that you'll see. And it's kind of interesting because all of their work that I would find, I couldn't find dates, I couldn't find titles, I think, but Claude Cahoon is kind of one of these first people, canonical artists that you'll see when people talk about gender and gender fluidity and playing with gender as being like the vehicle and the subject of one's work. And very early on, kind of identified with this idea of neither masculine or feminine, not man or woman, but this, we say non-binary now, but that language didn't exist. And I think that they actually use the term neuter. Neuter is the only gender that suits me. It's kind of in this little passage. And the Google Doc that I created has links to different resources and interviews and things like that. So also, I just want to interject that my background is in painting specifically. So I have a couple painters in here, but I tried to also in the Google Doc include, dancers, performers, writers. But this next artist, Salman Tor, I have a couple slides of his work. And a show just went down, I believe, in April that was at the Whitney. So these are kind of small works on canvas, on panel, oil paintings, and they're really in conversation with a lot of art history. But I think it's so interesting that the figures are all very queer coded. And I would love to hear your thoughts about like where that comes from. But seeing these like queer men that are kind of described by the artist as femme and playing with femininity, I find really moving. Like these are so soft and joyful to me, but like a quiet joy. I'd love to hear other people's perceptions of them. But I have Salman Tor says that he's interested in showing brown bodies in settings they are not traditionally shown in, bourgeois and bohemian settings, comfortable and secure. And I find that idea of security, of taking space with, unapologetically and with, I think like a nonchalance and an unself-consciousness is really beautiful. I'm gonna zip down to another painter. I think that Naudeline Pierre is someone that I wanted to share because I think that her work engages with gender in a way that doesn't seem as didactic. It's, to me, feels a little bit more slippery. So I'm just gonna scroll down. I know that this is fast, but interestingly, this artist grew up in a very religious background and had an exposure to a lot of the imagery and iconography of Christianity, and that has really informed her image making. And I think that the figures in her work are also inhabit their gender and the way that, in an interesting way, and the way that they interact, I think opens a lot of conversations for me. She says, I'm interested in expanding the alternate realities I've created in my work and is most excited about fantasy, escape, and world building. which also really calls to mind, I'm paraphrasing here, but the bell hooks quote, queer is not about who you're having sex with, but kind of envisioning and inhabiting a new reality for yourself in the world. Okay, I just want to check in. Go back to my Zoom window here. Where are you all? Actually here, let me scroll down. And then the last person that I included in this PDF is a choreographer and dancer, Tom White. And I think that he also has a quote that I wanted to share here, where I have a link to his YouTube channel on the Google Doc, but he writes that gender is wrapped up in personal experience, trauma, and desire. And, you know, his choreography and his dance kind of is a way of exploring those concepts. And then he kind of encourages your art form as a way to voice your discomfort, your pain, your confidence, your resilience. And I think that I'm so eager to hear what people's perception of some of these works, or to hear other artists or works that have resonated with you, or that you feel you'd want to gift the group. And I can reshare the screen if you want me to reference anything. Is anyone here an artist or a maker, a performer? No? Are we shaking our head no?
Sort of an amateur photographer, but you won't see any of my works in a gallery.
What are your subjects, or what are the things that you photograph, Karma?
So I like to work with print, which I know, or with film, which I know is, the environment and people don't like it, but I just feel like there's something nuance that you just can't get through digital unless you start to manipulate it digitally, which is fine. But essentially it's just folks around me. I mean, in my 20s and 30s, when I partied way too much, my friends would sort of make fun of me because I would bring cameras to all of our get-togethers and just sort of document us hanging out, and then I would print them and give them away as gifts to them. But it's more so just capturing folks in our sort of natural environment. It was just hanging out. But to answer your original question, we hosted an event last night for Pride with Morticia Godiva, who's an artist, performer, writer here in the city. And I wanted to share this quote that she shared last night, which I thought was just really powerful. We were talking about trans representation, particularly, and gender representation, particularly on television. And she said, normal is an illusion. What is normal to the spider is chaos to the fly. And I just thought that was so spot on.
Wow.
Yeah. And she's got some interesting works. I'll link.
Do you want to share any? I don't know. Do you have the possibility to share your screen?
I don't have any of it up.
Thanks for dropping
there's
that
a link. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I love the idea of crowdsourcing like some of these works. I think that seeing them and being able to talk about specific moments or specific aspects of them, I think it's hard to do it over Zoom. Let's just acknowledge like how awkward it is to talk about such like complex, nuanced things in a little internet box. But yeah, I love to hear like a specific artist. Thanks for sharing that link. And then the nice thing about having the Google Doc is that we can go back and reference things later to see. I heard Tina say that he could not access it, so I'm going to try and investigate that. I think you have to log on from a Columbia.
A new link. There is a second one shared, and the second one is accessible.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, thanks. Maybe I'll just share my screen again so we have this up. Is there one artist that you'd want me to focus on, that you want to see their images more?
I'll just add a little bit of Alak, I believe their pronunciation
Yeah.
is. I know you have them down there. I follow them
Yeah.
on Instagram and they are just wonderful. They're breaking a lot of gender roles and they're very feminine, but they embrace like their body hair a lot. So they get a lot of pushback because
Mhm.
they're out there and
Mhm.
it's amazing to see that as Carmen mentioned, like what we guess normal is an illusion. Like they look beautiful, they're owning it, and yeah, it's a really good influencer to follow if you're in on Instagram.
Yeah, I've been
I
following
would like,
them for a while.
yeah,
They also, oh, go
I
ahead.
just saw them.
Oh,
Oh no,
great.
I would like to hear more about them because I just started following them.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that they have a couple books, but one of them is kind of like this, um, written in a very accessible way, breaking down some of the gender binary language and kind of giving, actionable ways that we can all enact a more gender inclusive and gender diverse or expansive way of living. So I really out their website. There's a link to their website in this PDF. And then I have a link to a Spotify podcast where they're interviewed. And these screenshots that I chose are from a performance. The poem is called Reincarnation, but they describe in the poem this interaction they have with their father. And I apologize if this text is really small, maybe I can zoom, but a phrase that stuck out to me was the poet describes meeting their father's French friends, and the friends say that their father spent most of his time hanging out with a man named Karl Marx, him of a decolonized idea, and they tell me I look just like him, and I want to correct them. They know I'm not a man, and I feel poem it is layering. It's bringing in family histories. It's bringing in legacy. It's bringing in kind of the complexity of the ways that we can and externalize and live out our gender experience. And then there's this whole other experience of how people and uh, receive and I guess to it. And I think Gabby kind of mentioned they get a lot for presenting and enacting their gender as they do. We'll really open talk about on their Instagram and their social media presence. So thanks for talking about the work. Do we have any other thoughts or what things might catch you some of these images or? I'm happy to crowdsource some more.
Yeah, I just wanted to share a little bit of context on the link I shared. It's the latest thing I saw in person that kind of falls on the topic. And they had these two enormous paintings that depicted kind of pretty common motifs circulated in like earlier revolutionary painting artwork, but it was redone by Kent Monkman, I think is how I pronounce that. And
Yeah.
he kind of redid the works, including the Crossing the Delaware, but with like native people and new interplays between how, like where he feels like native people are now, but what was interesting about it that I thought of, why I thought about sharing it here, was that kind of the leading figure is it's based on a traditional indigenous culture of two-spirit, which is a third non-binary sexuality. And that's the spirit that he has in these images kind of either rescuing or leading their tribes to wherever they're going. And they're beautiful and just absolutely massive.
I think that I'm sharing an image now. I don't know if you can see it, but I agree. Like, there's something about seeing a reproduction of a painting that doesn't quite do it justice. But when you see these paintings on the wall, they're so luminous, and the scale of them, like you mentioned, is so huge.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you referenced that painter. So I guess we can turn to we got about 15 minutes left. We can kind of turn to our questions that we kind of set out to investigate together in the beginning. And I guess I'm going to make this even more simple and maybe a little bit more accessible and easier to step into. And I guess just why would you think that art is a site where we can discuss and investigate and play with gender? What makes art a place to do that?
I'll jump in. I think art historically has been the place where we can push the boundaries of like what's accepted within society. And like I'm just like thinking about everything I know about art. What I'm thinking about, like music, if I'm thinking like Verdi, or if I'm thinking like Michelangelo, as lots of Renaissance things, and that's what I know like more of maybe. But even things like the 17th century, like Dutch artists that were like, well, we're not gonna paint rich people anymore, we're gonna paint landscapes now. Like every time, like art is just like, and we've gotten to a point now where I think what we're doing is so cool and colorful and beautiful. And I really liked the Salman Tour, his work. Like I really am going to be looking into that a lot more. But I just think historically art is where we push for change.
Totally. Yeah, and when you were referencing, these things that we think of now, you look at a landscape painting and we don't necessarily see it as boundary breaking or rule breaking. Like a lot of art at the time was those things, but then out of that context, we might not recognize how it was that way. Any other thoughts? Oh, Kale.
Yeah, I also too really liked Salman Tour's work, especially I think that middle painting, which is probably inspired by that. Is it Monet or Manet? Painting?
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Which is a whole separate conversation about we could have about how queer nightlife has been commodified and how we're facing the same sort of existential interactions that these two bartenders in both those paintings were. But I just think that I was gonna say I used to work a lot of everything I did before applying to GS was in and around the queer art world, and so I just think in answer to your question, I don't know necessarily why. I guess you don't have to paint the world as it is because it's already there for you. So in creating art, it's, I don't know, creating that future that you're moving to, or putting yourself through a song or a painting in the world where you feel accepted. Or I think a word you used earlier when talking about Salman Tour was comfortable. And I just think it's also interesting too, in the larger context of queer art, how they're really responsive to their times, and how I don't know. Like I think art seems to present themes when we need them most, And so I think that these new wave of artists exploring gender are, whether consciously or unconsciously, responding to the need of the world right now to understand something that maybe is better explained without words.
Right. Wow. I was just reading an article, the activist Jacob Tobia, I'm not sure how to pronounce their last name, said even if you're a cis person, even if you think that you don't have gender feels, like your experience of gender is more complicated probably than you have examined or might realize. So I think when you referenced that we need these conversations, like the native, I thank you so much. Well said. We have about 10 minutes left in our hour together, and I just want to make some space for those who haven't gotten to share. If there's anything you want to add or a question you might want to ask, please feel free. It's saying that my internet connection is updated. I'm sorry if you can't hear me, if I'm cutting in and out.
Jennifer, I think I just add one thing, and I mentioned this in the chat. The thing about art is that it's not singular, right? There are so many different types of art. There's so many different opportunities for art. Art is both an individual and group experience at the same time, right? Like someone can create something that is expressive of themselves, but it becomes a shared experience with others, right? And like I said, I mentioned this in the chat. For me, when I think of gender fluidity and not sort of following the norms, and yet somehow it still can be commercialized, but it's fashion, right? And I think of Telfar, which is a kind of a recent brand that has really kind of exploded within the world of fashion, specifically as it relates to purses, right? Telfar is designed by this queer African man from Queens. And what I've been able to see is sort of multiple genders, multiple identities supporting this brand, and it feels great, right? And I've seen specifically those who are assigned male at birth and who kind of follow more social norms of masculinity, kind of taking an opportunity to free themselves through fashion with his work, and I just really love it, and I really appreciate it, and I think I love that folks are able to explore art through whatever spectrum and sort of form that they want to. So I just wanted to share that. And I appreciate all the artists that you shared as well.
Well, thanks. I really liked hearing that you brought up the fashion context, because I feel like the body is such a site of like performance, of course, and the ways that we present, and it's just, of course, fashion such a, and when you think about the collision of like fashion and money and commodity culture and stuff, there's so many conversations to have about that. I just wanted to say to Yanis, I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name, that I'm uploading the PDF right now straight to the chat, if that's helpful. So let's see. I guess in our last minute here, I just want to thank you for participating. I'll be keeping my eye on this Google Doc and really excited to see what you add. I also kind of wanted to acknowledge that some of the art may not be your cup of tea, may not be your personal taste, or I kind of have a like mentality of fear no art. So feel free to put things, maybe if you're gonna add something that other people might find disturbing or confrontational for them, maybe put a comment or an asterisk with just like a content advisory, just so you know, like, oh, this contains this type of theme or this type of content. But don't be shy to put things that are, you know, maybe not everyone's taste. You know, like there's a hardcore punk band like in our list there, and I was like, don't know who's into this genre of music, but they're doing interesting things. So let's see. I was just wondering if we could go around just kind of maybe in a closing circle to share one thing that you're taking away. It can be just as simple as a word that's your takeaway.
I can go. I'm feeling inspired.
I'm feeling grateful for the new input.
I also feel inspired seeing many types of arts.
I see art could be freeing and comfortable with the keyboard.
I think I'm feeling eager for more.
Yeah, along with eager, I was going to say hungry or curious for more. Exactly.
Yeah, I think I'm also along the lines of grateful and eager and curious. I'd seen some work similar to this before from a friend who is an animator / artist, and so seeing this makes me want to explore a little bit more, kind of on my own, instead of getting references from people. But seeing all of this work and looking at the doc now, there's definitely a lot I think to look at and to learn from, and looking forward to it.
Okay.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Juniper Montecani, for guiding us through this conversation, and to everyone who attended and participated. We hope that you were able to gain a lot out of today's conversation. I know this is just the beginning. You all are welcome to connect with each other, as Juniper mentioned, through this document, continue conversations outside of this, as the world sort of opens back up. If there are opportunities for you to connect in person and visit the many sort of artistic spaces that's offered within New York City. Excuse me. Sorry. I just want to remind everyone that tonight's event is part of the Task Force on Inclusion and Belonging at Columbia, that's about making friends and building community through real conversations.